There we go. Make sure that we're recording too. I want to make sure we've got the replay here because there are a couple of gals who have to work during the day and wanted to make sure we can get that over to them. So, all right. With that, we are now going to go ahead and get started. I would love to hear, why are you here today? Right? What are you hoping to get out of this experience? What made you decide of all the things you could be spending your time on to hop on here today? Right? Go ahead and put that in the chat. I'd love to hear what is most important to you so that I can make sure to tailor the things that we're talking about to you. And it's okay too if you're not really sure. You're like, well, I was just kind of curious and I wanted to see what it was about. All right. Give you a second here while you're thinking about that. Because I know everyone often has different reasons for being here, and those reasons matter to me. They're important to see what is it that actually brought you here today. Hmm. So it looks like a few of you are typing those in the chat. We got a few more of you just tuning in now. Go ahead and share with us where you're from if you're just getting on. Okay. And while you're thinking about that, I want you I want to let you know that the things we're going to be talking about today are, and what you end up walking away with by the time we are done, is one, a deeper understanding of what it means to be a strong spiritual woman. Two, greater clarity around where you personally are in your journey to the next level of your ability to be a strong spiritual woman, because we're all in different places and there is no end point of arrival. We're going to talk a little bit about more in a moment. And a basic understanding of the one skill that is going to transform your ability to show up in any aspect of your life. Right? Whether you have challenges with your laundry, you have challenges with getting your kids to do their homework, if you're feeling overwhelmed in all the responsibilities, maybe some of you are in that stage of caretakers for family members, like your parents. Maybe you have concerns or questions that weigh really heavily on your heart. Whatever it is, this is going to help you navigate that more. Okay? All right, so we've got a few trickling in here. Krista, familiar face, fun to have you back, says, love listening to you and what inspires you, Emily, and how it can inspire me too. Beautiful. Is it Teddy? I hope I'm saying that correctly. Yeah? Okay, awesome. To realize and get closer to my full spiritual potential, find my strength even in the middle of chaos of young children. Yes. Oh, I love these. Beautiful reasons why. And see, Gina says, I was curious to know about this one skill you talk about. I also feel like we can all use strong spiritual resilience. Ooh, yes. Things in the world are crazy. Constant worldly programming can weaken us spiritually, and I want to feel spiritually confident. I want to know what more I can do to strengthen myself spiritually. Oh, Gina, God, you are in the right place. Okay, love this. So, with that, all of us are living different lives right now, right? So we all have different things that are going on in our own world. And I want to know if you're open and comfortable to sharing a little bit with me about what is one of the biggest challenges you are navigating right now. And I'll tell you a little bit about one of them for me. My kids have been young and little for a while. My oldest is 9, and we're starting to transition out of the like baby and little kids and into more of the like, I'm a person, regular kid, almost approaching preteen. I'm trying not to think about it too much. But it's different because when they're so little, my ability and relationship with them has been so much related around just like being with them. And now they're like actually developing into a person. And so more of that relationship is becoming person to person rather than just cuddles and hugs and food and general taking care of them, right? So it's been an interesting transition for me to start learning, how do I still feel close to them? How do I start having more of this personal relationship and being more intentional with it? Because it's another relationship I have to put time and effort into. Whereas when they're little, they're kind of just doing my life with me. And there's something simple and beautiful in that, as well as all of the physical demands that can be a lot. So that's one thing for me. But I would love to hear, what is something that you are navigating right now? big or small, anything that you feel comfortable sharing with us. Mm. And even if you don't want to share it with everyone, I want to encourage you to at least write this down for yourself. Okay? Because what we're going to be talking about later today is going to be able to help you with whatever the challenge is that is going on in your life right now. Okay? So, Sarah says time management and keeping promises to myself about my schedule. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Love this one. Okay. Yes. I think many people can relate to that. Right? I also have a background as a professional organizer, and so I get all of that around the productivity and management of things. Like it's a very real challenge. Christy says, my youngest is going to full-time elementary school next year and with her in half days now. I feel like I'm in a weird spot of where do I spend my time? What do I focus on? What is my role? Ooh, yes, right? These transitions, they kind of just like happen in life, and yet there's also like a really big impact that occurs. The very foundations of how we connect, how we spend our time, how we focus, right? Yes, I love these. Okay. Feel free to continue sharing your challenges in there because again, everything that we're going to be talking about today has that ability to help support you in navigating through that process. Okay. Because what we're focusing on today is the idea of what it means to be a strong spiritual woman. And what's interesting about that is I don't know if you guys are like me, but when I used to think about what it was to be a strong spiritual woman, I kind of put my life into two different categories. There was like my religious spiritual life, and then there was like the mundane real life, like everything else that was kind of going on. And so I had reading my scriptures and going to church and going to the temple and like praying and doing come follow me, all those things, right? And then there was like dishes and laundry and bills and errands and appointments and all of those different tasks that were happening, right? And so it was kind of like, how do I juggle these two different parts of who I am? And if there is one idea that I hope you walk away with from today, it is beginning to recognize that these are not meant to be two separate parts of ourselves or our lives. Right? Now, sometimes we kind of dip over and it's like, yeah, the more I work on my spiritual life, the more it can help and impact my real life, right? And we kind of see that benefit and that value. But I really hope that you can start to recognize that there is a way of living where even the mundane, everyday tasks that we are doing have the ability to be rooted and grounded and operate from this place of spiritual connection. Okay. And so, when I'm talking about what it is to be a strong spiritual woman, I want to get clear on a couple of things first before we dive into it more. And that is when I say a strong spiritual woman, I'm not talking about some like arrival point. And, we can check off your list of like, if you have all these things here, then yes, you are now officially a strong spiritual woman. Like, here's your degree, you've done it, right? A strong spiritual woman is a continuum. Okay, so we're going to have this repeated cyclical process of our growth and our capabilities and our experiences. Right. So wherever you are on this process, right, this continuum of your growth, there are things that you have learned already. There are things that you are stepping into, and there is more potential for you going forward. Right. And so remembering that pattern and that process is essential because sometimes we get bogged down and we get too focused on the future of like, oh, there's so much I still need to do. Or we get too focused on where we are right now that we're like, I don't even know how to keep up with my day. Or sometimes we're living in the past and we're really caught up in like, I should have done this or I didn't do that. Or am I doing enough? Right. And I want to help us have this perspective of recognizing it's all three, right? We are perpetually in a place of having gained experiences, of going through experiences, and be opening up new experiences for ourselves. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, when we're talking about what it is to be a strong spiritual woman, I am not talking about so much the things that you do in your life, so much as we're going to be describing who you are. This is an internal way of being. Okay. Now, this was a big shift for me because, again, I was very used to focusing on this idea of, oh, a strong spiritual woman does this, right? I'm more spiritual if I'm regularly going to the temple, or I'm making sure that I'm reading my scriptures this much, or that I'm praying every day, right? Those things that I'm doing, that's what is going to make me more spiritual. And we kind of get this format that shows up where we're like, okay, here's me. I'm a woman, right? I need to be more spiritual. So here are the things I can do to be spiritual. And if I do enough of them, then I will be strong. Strong spiritual woman. And that's kind of the mindset that we sometimes get stuck in. Well, we're really going to open that up and give you a whole new way of looking at each of these three components. Okay. And looking at them less through this lens of what do I have to do, but getting back to the root of who we are. Because at the end of the day, the tasks that you are going to need to do in any given day are going to change. The things you're doing today are going to be different than tomorrow. Even things that you do repeatedly, like you got to make dinner tonight, and maybe you're making dinner tomorrow. But maybe tonight you're cooking at home, maybe tomorrow you're going out. Even if you're cooking at home, maybe tonight you're making one meal and tomorrow you're making tacos, right? There is difference in what we do every single day. Change is one of the most fundamental aspects of our human experience here. And so, learning how to operate from a place that is rooted and has a sense of connection, regardless of the things that are changing around us, that's what we want to do. Okay. So, what is that ability to stay in that centered place? Okay. Well, it takes all three of these components, being strong, being spiritual, and being a woman. Okay. And we're going to talk more about each one of them here in just a minute. But sometimes we get focused on just one or two of those different traits together. Right? When we look at our lives and we're trying to improve things or we're trying to change things, we tend to get focused on one of them, maybe two of them. Okay, so this can look like, for example, we focus on the strength, right? This has been very much a thing seen in Western culture right now, especially here in the US, where there's this big idea of like, let's empower women, right? We want to empower women. And that strength is the main thing that is focused on, right? Now, oftentimes when we think about being strong, there are ideas around being independent, being capable, being accomplished, being confident, being assertive, right? Having skills and abilities and being able to use them. And those things are valuable. There is a purpose in them. I believe God wants us to be capable and doing things and having skills and abilities. But if you look at some women who focus on just that strength, what can often show up is additional feelings of being burnt out, exhausted, and even resentful. Right? Now, sometimes this shows up for moms too. I've been guilty of this, of like, I'm just going to do it all. Right? And usually it is coming from one of two places. One is if I don't do it, it won't happen. And the other is it's just easier if I do it. Right? Anyone else fall into this pattern, or is this just me? Right? Let me know in the chat here. Okay? Because it's really easy to get in this place of just, okay, I can be strong. I can do it all, right? But when we get into that place, we often start running solely on our own strength, and we are not relying on spiritual power. And the second thing that tends to happen is we are not operating oftentimes in a way that supports our natural feminine essence and design. Okay. And this is something that you're starting to see some places that are talking about more. We're going to discuss it in a little bit, what I mean by that. But those two things are absolutely essential, right? Again, if you only have one or two and not all three, you're going to experience some sort of negative experience in your life in one degree or another, from small frustration to, oh my gosh, I cannot keep going like this. Okay, so my goal and desire is to help you really understand what these three things are, how to recognize where you are, how to balance them, so that when something starts showing up in your life and it starts to feel off, you have a framework and an idea of what to start looking at to shift things in your experience. Okay, now some of you might be thinking, okay, well, that's not me. I'm pretty good at relying on God's strength, or at least reminding myself and remembering when I fall out of that connection, right? And you may be thinking, I'm pretty good at understanding and valuing my role as a woman, okay? But one of the things that may be showing up here is you have the spiritual and you have more of the woman, but you might be missing the strong component. Okay. So when we have spiritual women, this can look like you're very faithful, you're believing, you're nurturing, you're really family oriented and focused on these things. But there is often an lack of actually knowing how to truly access and command spiritual power. Okay. Now, this was one of the most transformative ideas for me because I did not realize that there was a difference between being spiritual as a woman and being strong in the sense of being able to access and command spiritual power. And that's one of the differences here is we recognize there is this need for strength, okay? And we recognize we are supposed to have this reliance on God. And yet there's often a split that kind of shows up between those two. In one case, we tend to take God out of the equation and we're like, oh, here's just me and I can do this and I can muddle through. Or we take ourselves out of the equation and we focus just on God. Well, God can do this. God has the strength. God is capable of this, right? And I believe we are not meant to operate in either of those places. Because if you think about it, God can do anything, right? So if we remove ourselves from the equation, what is the point? The whole point and purpose, and we know this as Latter-day Saints, is we came here to earth. We were spiritual beings who exist first and foremost. We come here to earth to get a physical body, to have experiences, to learn and to grow. And I believe a part of that is learning how to, in physical form, access and command that spiritual power for ourselves. That is a part of the pattern and the process of becoming like God. Okay. And as women, we're not very used to thinking about this idea very much, right? It's something that, I never really heard talked about or discussing growing up. It was a new idea I had to discover as I got older. What does that mean? What does that look like? I, generally grew up with the idea of like, my dad, or you'd hear of priesthood holders needing to be able to like be prepared and ready to give a blessing at a moment's notice. And that was kind of the closest frame of reference. But I never really heard anyone talk about or describe what that could look like for me in my life as a woman. Okay. We're going to start changing that today because what I have found is when we are exhausted, we are depleted, we are overwhelmed, we are anxious by whatever is going on, it is usually because we are in this tug of war between like putting forward our own effort and then stopping and being like, okay, now I need more God, and trying to get more God in our lives. And then, okay, now I got to go back and do more of my experience. And then, and now I need to get more God. And that's draining. And what I discovered was when I could learn to start bringing those two experiences together and meeting the experience where I was, that transformed the energy I was operating off of. Okay. When we're commanding spiritual power, it doesn't drain you or deplete you, it actually energizes you. And that's the difference. Okay. So we're going to go into this in more detail, but I just wanted to give some of these basic things here at the start. Hopefully, you're starting to get a feel for this idea of being a strong spiritual woman and getting these three ideas out of the way, that this is a continuum. Okay. So things that I'm talking about, you may recognize like, oh, yeah, I'm really good at this in this area of my life, but I'm still kind of struggling here. Or I'm good in this way, but I want to increase my ability to do that. Okay. It's a continuum, not an arrival point. Second thing, it's not about what we do, it's about who we are and where we operate from. And three, it takes all three of these aspects, being strong, being spiritual, and being a woman. If we have any of them out of balance, it's going to cause problems here. Okay. So Got a couple more comments here I want to catch up on here because I'm loving this. Patricia says, guiding and encouraging my young adult daughter in her journey of finding her spiritual strength, being an example to her of a strong spiritual woman. Oh, I love that so much. Yes, yes, yes. Christy says, all the time, it's like I forget I can have help. Yes, right? Like, so easy to get caught in that place of, I'm just going to do it all because it's easier, or if I don't do it, nobody else is, right? Krista says, totally, me too. Okay. Good, good, good. Glad that this is resonating. Okay. So, some of you right now are probably thinking you don't feel very strong, very spiritual, or maybe you're even questioning what it means to be a woman. And what does that matter for me? What are the important roles and responsibilities? How is that supposed to show up? Right? Others of you may feel very spiritual, very strong and capable, and very clear and comfortable in your womanhood. Okay? Wherever you are in your experience, my goal is to help you access more peace, more ease, more connection, and more love. Okay? Because the things that we're going to be exploring here are something that can take 5 years, 10 years, 30 years to figure out, or we can shorten that journey into actually understanding what is at the foundation and how to start applying them. And I am on a mission to simplify that learning curve for as many women as I can. And that's why we're going to dive in to discussing this. But before we do that, I want to share with you a little bit about me because I know, you know, brand new, some of you are familiar faces. It's fun to have you back here, but others of you are brand new, may not know anything about me. So why listen to this woman or anything that she has to share? Well, for me, I have been on my own journey of growth and development as a strong spiritual woman throughout my whole life, just like all of you, right? But one of the really prominent moments for me occurred when I was graduating out of high school and just beginning to start college. I was somebody who had this grand vision of what I thought for my life. I was going to go on a mission and a study abroad and do grad school and like all these different things. And then, by the time I was like 28 or something, I would get married and start having kids. And I instead felt God invite me into a different journey and a different path. And it was right around the time when the missionary age was changing. So women were no longer serving at 21 and they were able to start serving at 19. And all my friends were starting to go on missions. And what was very interesting was I felt God tell me that I was not supposed to go on a mission, that I was actually supposed to get married. Now, I was dating my now husband. We were high school sweethearts, but that was not my thought or plan at all. And it was a really big process for me to learn to start saying, okay, am I going to trust God and the invitation I'm being invited into, or am I going to stay in myself and my plan and what I think? And I ultimately decided to trust God. Despite there being a lot of drama in how that all unfolded, we ended up eloping and not going through the temple or getting married, or getting sealed for a couple years after that. But it was the perfect pattern and the perfect process for what I needed. Because what would unfold would be an experience of me learning very viscerally, very practically, very tangibly to understand what it actually means to be in my womanhood, to be spiritually powerful, to be in my strength as an individual, but also in partnership with God and my relationship. And that trickled into every aspect of my life, from the 4 children that I had to the multiple businesses that I started and ran to what I now do in working with women. I share that with you because the things I'm going to share with you are not just random haphazard ideas. I have seen the impact play out again and again with women that I work with. And I've seen the difference that can happen when they start to understand what this skill is. Okay. So, again, the point and purpose here is to say there's a foundation for this and the things that we're going to be discussing. And that main skill is what I like to call your pillar presence. Okay. Now, What is a pillar of presence? Well, a pillar of presence is your ability to have a strong core connection to who you are and to move through the world from that place of connection. Okay. This is the opposite of being very reactionary to circumstances or conditions or things that are going on, because we have that strong connection inward. But part of what makes it different is it's not just a sense of who you are as a human being, it is a pillar that extends vertically and downwards as well. Okay. To better illustrate this idea, I want you to imagine a tree. Okay. The foundation or the earth there is Jesus Christ. And that's where we get a lot of, the nutrients, the living water, that type of thing. And our tree extends upwards. And above us, we have the light of God, okay, that is directing us and helping us to grow. Our heavenly parents who are guiding and care about us. Okay? Now, the branches and the fruit of this tree are much like our life and experiences, the connections we have with other people, the creations that we have, the way that we serve and build relationship with other people. But there's one other aspect of this tree that we often do not focus on enough, and that is the trunk or the core. Okay. Without a strong, sturdy trunk or core, this tree cannot thrive. It cannot do what it was designed and intended to do. Okay. So when I am talking about a pillar presence, it is this full connection. It is the ability to have that strong core inward of who you are that is rooted in Jesus Christ and anchored with God above. And that is what will allow you to flourish and grow in anything you are wanting to do. Okay. Because let's be real, we all have challenges that are showing up. And oftentimes, the roads that we are walking are not nice and like smooth paths, right? Sometimes they are mountains, sometimes they are really jagged and rocky terrains that we are asked to climb through. Okay. But I want to take you back to like seventh grade, ninth grade geometry class. I think it's ninth grade here in Utah. And if you'll recall, as long as you have 3 points on any surface, you can have stability, right? That's why a stool with 3 legs is really powerful, right? If you have just one, tips over. Two, if you have a flat surface, can potentially work, but that 3 is what gives us a really powerful anchor, okay? And there are actually 3 different pillars or components to being able to hold a pillar presence in your life. And those 3 pillars are your feminine identity, your spiritual power, and your personal authority. Okay. We're going to go through each one of these, and this is where we're going to do a little bit of an assessment. Okay, I'm going to ask some questions. You can rate yourself 1 to 5 on them to help you get a better clarity of understanding of where you are in these 3 pillars that are foundational to having this skill. Okay, before I go into that, I'd love to hear what are the thoughts that are coming up for you? What are the questions? Are we having any light bulb moments or things that are happening for you? Yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Okay. Good, good, good. We're soaking it in. I'm seeing some nodding heads here, right? We're like, let's get to the meat of this. Okay. All right. So the first one we're going to be focusing on is our feminine identity. Okay. Now, when we look at who we are, okay, as Latter-day Saints, we have a beautiful theology that teaches us we are not just our human self, right? There is more to who we are. We are also spiritual beings. Okay? And that is a fundamental part of our divine identity. Well, what we often don't talk about, though, is that in both our physical human experience and I believe in our spiritual identity and experience as well, there is a key aspect of our feminine nature. Right, that plays a role. In the physical component, we can look at this very naturally in terms of things like our menstruational cycle. Okay? We are fundamentally cyclical beings, and yet most of us were not raised or taught how to construct our lives in a way that honors and respects this. Okay? Our energy patterns are different. We have fluctuations in The way our bodies work and the different types of energy we have access to at different times. Most often, we've been taught that this is a limiting thing, that we need to work through it, we need to overpower it, and we need to try and untangle the circular nature and make it more linear. Okay. Excuse me. One of the things that I have learned is when we are instead able to recognize, work with, and honor our physical but also spiritual nature that is feminine in design, we actually become more productive. Okay? One of the practical examples of this is on the first day of my menstruational cycle. I have finally gotten my family into a place where they recognize I am basically off duty for that day. I am typically in bed, lying down, resting. I'm eating nourishing foods. Sometimes I take a bath, and I'm just very focused on taking care of my physical body. One of the reasons I do this is because I have found the more I preserve that first day in particular, the more wealth of energy I have for the entire month. When I positioned it to my husband from this place of what's more efficient? Me spending one day to help set the tone of the energy that I will have for an entire month, or pushing through that day to try and make something happen on that first day, right? It is a different way of prioritizing. It is a different way of thinking, but it is powerful and it is essential. I see far too many women right now where we are living in a world that does not recognize, that does not fully acknowledge or support our feminine nature, right? We are beings who were designed very specifically, and it is on us to make sure that we are understanding that and prioritizing it in our lives. Okay. Now, I know some of you are in this space where you're like, I'm not menstruating anymore, right? Well, that is part of a bigger, broader, beautiful experience because each month there is a pattern here that plays out through our menstruation that is then repeated on a grander scale across our lifetime. And that pattern is a process of birth, life, death, rebirth, right? Each phase in our menstrual cycle is teaching us about how to become a new version of who we are. And each month we are invited into that process. The first week of our cycle is where we're often in most of a planning mode. This is a stage that is wanting to keep us focused on um, what are the things we want to be doing? What is important for us? What are the new goals or intentions that we want to be holding? Our second week is where we become more social and energized and gives us some momentum to start moving towards those things. Our third week is often the week where we become more emotional or there's hormones arise. And I believe PMS and a lot of things related to it, yes, there's always a physical component that can sometimes show up. So sometimes physically our hormones are out of balance that can make that worse. But also, there is a deep misunderstanding of what this phase is about. This is the death phase. This is where we are meant to grieve and mourn and release old versions of who we were and how we were showing up. So that then on our fourth week, when we actually menstruate, we are not physically releasing that and paving the way for a new version of us to show up the next month. And so ideally, throughout the 20 or so years, 20 to 30 years that we're menstruating, that is the period of time where we are growing and developing who we are as a woman through this repeated cycle. And through that process, we then become prepared as we start shifting in our life, where we go through perimenopause, menopause, and that is where we actually become the anchor for our families, for our society, of who we have become throughout those years. And yet, if we are not conscious of this, we're not aware of this, we're not working with this throughout our lives, what actually ends up happening is we hit perimenopause and menopause, and all of a sudden, we do not have that trunk or that foundation that has been consciously established enough. And we start realizing, oh, everything feels like it's falling apart because we have not been supported and working in this process that was meant to support us in our development. And so, oftentimes, I see women who are in these stages of life who are struggling, and part of it is, again, there can be a hormonal aspect to it, but there's also this piece of we have not been living our lives in a way that is naturally supporting that. Okay, so recognizing our feminine nature shows up in so many different ways. There is feminine communication. It is not just this like hormonal aspect of who we are, but it is also a fundamental aspect of how we are meant to move through life. And another key aspect of that is our ability to create life, to birth. So much of the world in the masculine aspect of things is very focused on building things because that is a masculine trait and dynamic. The feminine is much more focused on birth. So many times we have ideas and dreams and things we want to be doing in our lives, and yet we kind of play with them in this way of like, I'm buying little baby clothes and I'm picking out the names for my children. But heavens no, I do not want to go through the process of actually being pregnant and going through the labor process to birth them, right? And that's not just about physical children. That shows up about the business idea you have. That shows up about the new routine you want to have with your children. This pattern of birth and creation is woven into every aspect of creation that we live in our lives. One of my favorite examples is to look at, like, say you're planning a birthday party for your son, right? That process starts with conception of an idea, and you kind of play with it and figure out what you're going to do. And then it hits a climax point where it's like, okay, it's day of the party. We got to make sure stuff is happening and occur. And then the party happens, and there's like the after piece, right? So we go through this pattern and this process all the time. And yet we are not consciously viewing our lives and our creations through that place. And as a result, it depletes us. Okay. So, a couple of questions to help you start getting clear on where you are in recognizing your womanhood and integrating that into your life. Okay. First one I want to ask you is how, I want you to answer this question. 1 to 5, we're going to do this in the chat. Do you believe fundamentally that women are equally as important and valuable as men? Okay. 1 to 5, 5 being like, yes, absolutely, that feels very true for me. One, you're like, no, I don't know that I'm really there. Okay. And again, you're welcome to do these on your own. I'd love to share it in here. Awesome. Chris is like 5 on that. Great. 5. Awesome. Okay. Again, no judgment in where you are. This is just a self-assessment. We're just seeing what's coming up for you. Second, um, you feel comfortable and confident in your nature as a cyclical being and applying that in your life. So again, this cycle can be like recognizing your menstrual cycle and aligning your life with it. This can be recognizing this pattern of birth and viewing your life through that lens. Okay. 1 to 5 on this. What do you feel like you are? 5 is like, yes, I'm aware of this. I do it all the time. 1 is like, no, I just thought these were physical things that happened and annoyances that I had to deal with as a woman. I'm not used to thinking about it this way. Okay, good. We got a little more variance here. A couple 1s, 2, 4. Love this. Okay. Third question for you here. Do you value and see importance in your nature and design as a woman? 1 to 5. Okay. Do you feel value in your nature and essence as a woman? Here we go. 4s, 4, 5. Love this. Okay. So this is something that I find that is really interesting, right? Especially as Latter-day Saint women, we have beautiful teachings that talk about the importance of women and the roles and essence here. But oftentimes we're still missing some of that piece of actually living in alignment with who we are and actually understanding that on a deeper level. Okay. So that may be one area of for you to be working on is recognizing how can I gain and understand more about my divine design and essence as a woman and how to actually live that in my life. Okay? Because if you want to have a strong skill as a pillar presence, you got to be rooted in that. Otherwise, it's going to be cutting you down. You're going to be working against yourself and your design. Okay? So that's the first one. Second pillar. Okay? Um, actually, I'm going to ask two more questions here for you guys to look at. And one of them is, in what way do you feel like you are thriving in relationship to your identity as a woman? Okay. So maybe you really value yourself as a woman, like you feel a sense of pride in that. Maybe you love the potential and capability for birth, and you've seen that play out through the children that you have, and you love being a mother with them. Maybe you recognize this pattern of creation and birth, and there are a lot of things that you love to create or that you have brought to life. Maybe you've brought to life a business or a successful career, right? There are other expressions and ways that we can follow this feminine essence. So, what is one way that you feel like you are thriving in that? Okay. Jill said, I chose to believe that I do bring value no matter what happens. I love that. I love that. Right? So at the end of the day, that's on us. We're the only ones who can make that choice. Okay? I love it. The second question I want to ask you here is, what is one area that you feel like you can improve in? Okay? Some part of recognizing your essence or your nature as a woman and integrating that in your life more. Okay? What is one area you can improve on more? And again, the point of this is not to feel any judgment or shame or behind or any of those things. Though sometimes there also are some big emotions that can come up of like, ugh, why was I not taught this? Why did I not share this? Right? So if any of those things ever arise for you, know that that is okay. Right? We are part of a big human collective through generations, right? And each generation does the best that we can. And we have the opportunity to decide what is the legacy we want to leave for our daughters, for our granddaughters, for other women who will just simply inherit the world and the experiences that we help carve out. Okay? So let's see. Christy says, trusting myself more with the ideas of creation I have. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Patricia says, confidence in my knowledge. Yes. Christy says, business ideas on how to run the house. Oh, yes. I love these guys. These are so good. So, um, the second pillar then is one that helps us. So we need to have this feminine identity because we need to know kind of the blueprint that we're meant to be operating from in whatever it is we're wanting to create in our lives or our experiences. Okay. The second thing is we need to be properly aligned with the power source to help fuel that blueprint and start bringing it to life. Okay. So that's where the second pillar of spiritual power comes into play. Okay. And this pillar is actually focused on our connection and the spiritual pattern and principles at play, right? So we need to be able to understand and recognize those patterns and principles. And we need to be aware and know how to establish and recognize the connection that we have. Okay. So here's some examples of what I mean by that. Okay. We're going to jump to the questions here. So, 1 to 5, do you have a basic desire to connect with God, Spirit, the divine? Okay. 1 being like, no, that's not important to me. 5 being like, yes, very much. That's an important part of my life. Okay. 5, 5, love this. So good. Okay, good. Now, the reason this is a question is because if you don't have that basic desire, then it's going to be really hard to develop this pillar, right? So we're off to a good place by recognizing that desire is already strong and intact. Okay. The second question I have for you is, do you feel that you have a basic understanding of how to recognize and establish that connection? So again, how confident do you feel in your ability to recognize when you're receiving information from God, when you have that discernment, and when you are in a place of connection versus not? Okay? 1 to 5 on this again, right? Sometimes it might be easy for us to like feel God's love or feel of God's presence, but actually being able to recognize and rely on like direction that we feel like we're receiving or discernment that we're receiving, that's the next piece here. Okay. All right. We got some two, two, three. Yeah. Right. So that's a place where sometimes it can get a little tricky, right? How do I know if it's my thoughts versus a prompting? How do I go about deciding these different things? Okay. That can be challenging. And yet, if we want to be able to utilize and rely on this power, we have to have a better ability to recognize how to establish that connection and to understand it. But just because we can understand it or we can establish that connection doesn't always mean that we are capable of relying and trusting in that feeling or connection. Okay, so 1 to 5, do you feel that you are capable or act, sorry, my words are getting all messed up. Do you feel that you are capable of relying and trusting in that connection? Okay. 1 to 5. And notice I said the word capable here, right? So it doesn't mean you're doing it perfectly today. But how well do you feel that you could learn to do this? Okay. Good, good, good. 4, 5, 3, 4, 3, 4. Good, good. Okay. Yes. Okay. So tell me one area then that you feel like you are thriving in your ability to establish this connection or rely on it. Okay. Maybe that is, it's really easy for you to feel close to God when you are in the temple. Or maybe you love to go on, this is one for me, morning runs. And that's often the place where I feel like I connect with God the most. It's like a mix between a run and a prayer and a meditation all in one. Right? So, where do you feel like you are thriving in being able to recognize or feel some of that connection? Okay. Sarah says, I'm really good at recognizing things after they've played out. Yes, right? This is big. Sometimes we have to, most of the time, actually, like we have to learn through the experience. And so if we can't see the pattern afterwards, then we can't know what it is that we need to change. The trick then becomes, how do I move it so it's not always just after the fact? I would love to be able to know sooner ahead of the fact. Right? Yes, love that. Patricia says weekly temple and morning walks. Ooh, yes. My kind of gal, Patricia. I love it. Yes, yes. Okay. What is one area that you feel like you could improve? Right? So, what is a place where you desire more connection? Right? Is there something that you wish you were more confident in? Right? I know for me, for a long time, this was I really wanted to better understand what was me and what was God. Right? I really struggled with that. So that was a big one for me. Hmm. Let's see, what else do we have here? Jill says, I spend an hour a day with God as non-negotiable through study, prayer, and in quiet of the morning. Oh, yes, so good. I agree. There's such a power in being able to have some of that time. And it also looks different in different seasons for different people. So beautiful. I love that you found that is an important thing for you and you've prioritized it. Sarah says, not being scared to connect. Oh, yes. Can we talk about the realness of this? Right? Like, well, what am I going to hear? What am I going to be told? How do I trust it? I don't know. Like, maybe I don't want to be told this. Maybe I don't want to know that, right? There's a lot of things that can actually get in our way of being willing to open ourselves up to receiving more, to having that connection, and knowing how to integrate it into our lives, right? Okay. Jill says, I want to improve on not putting God in a box and to find lots of the different ways he talks to me. Oh, yes. Okay, this is so good because I want to share with you a little example of this for you from my own life and experience. When I was younger, I loved um, writing down different quotes at church. I had notebooks, and if there was any speaker or anything who said something that I liked, I would write it down. Kind of like in general conference, taking notes on like good things that a speaker said or whatever. And I think I was doing it as a way to try and like not be bored in sacrament meeting, but it also ended up becoming a really powerful tool as I got older. And so similarly, the same way I learned to read my scriptures and that I had, favorite scriptures that would really stand out to me or speak to me, I had these what became several volumes of notebooks that were just filled with the wisdom of my neighbors and the people that I was connecting with, family, and I would often look through them the same way that I would look through my scriptures as kind of another way to receive guidance and direction. And I started to realize that it was really cool the same way, sometimes I could read a scripture and it felt like God was just like speaking those words directly into my heart of like, oh, yes, that was exactly what I needed to hear today. Oftentimes I would be going through my quote books and I would have a similar experience, right? It was like, oh, yes, I needed to hear that today. And it was really neat because I started to recognize, hey, there's a pattern here, right? Like, this isn't just scriptures. This is like a process and a way that God is communicating words to me and helping me understand experiences. So I was a young teenager and I started playing with this a little bit, and Pinterest was just coming out. And so I was super excited with Pinterest and things, and I loved finding the cute pictures of quotes on Pinterest and saving them. And pretty soon I started to have kind of this virtual version of my quote book. And what I found was really cool is I would open up my phone, and oftentimes what I needed as direction or insight would be like the first quote that would pop up at the top. And this became like another tool and way that I started connecting with God. Well, as I got older and I started to have more and more experiences with God, I began to realize that this is part of the pattern and process, that God is wanting to speak with each of us in individual ways. And that oftentimes it's not so much that there's like one singular right way for God to speak to us, but that it is more about what are the ways that we want to establish communication with God. So, this was where it got really fun. I decided one day I wanted to see if God could bring messages to my heart through seeing animal shapes in the clouds. That was like my big test on this experience. And it was really beautiful because I decided the way I was going to do it was when I was struggling or I had a thought or thing that I wanted direction or guidance from God. Oftentimes it was always in the car driving. I would look out the window, and the first cloud that I saw that looked like the shape of some sort of animal, I would see whatever the first animal that kind of came to mind. And that animal, I would look up spiritual meaning of blank animal. And it was incredible to see how many times there was this pattern that would show up of what exactly I needed to hear. I would see a horse and I would look it up, and there would be things saying like, you are strong and capable of doing the things that are needed in your life. And I was like, oh, yes, that was another one, right? And when I was younger, these felt like random things or inconsequential things. And it took me a while to figure out that there was actually an underlying pattern and process for recognizing how God works, how God communicates with us. Um, and on a personal level, how to start trusting that. So for me, that was part of what really shifted it and strengthened so that I didn't have as many questions, as many doubts, or as many things of like, well, is this just random? Is this just what's showing up? There was a pattern, there was a process that was repeatedly showing up. And as I practiced that and continued to refine it, the trust and reliability in it grew as well. Okay. So those are things to think about of like, what are different ways that you have maybe just a desire to improve your current spiritual experience? Okay. What would that look like or feel like for you? If any of you are feeling up to it, I'd love to have you share that here in the chat. Okay. While you're doing that, I want to make sure we have time to get to our third pillar here. And this third pillar is the one that took me probably the longest to recognize and understand, and yet was one of the most impactful when I did. Okay. And this pillar is that of personal authority. Now, I'm going to preface before we dive into this because initially I really questioned what words to use. I originally was using personal power, and I felt God directly say, "No, you need to use the word authority." And I was like, "Please don't make me use that word. I do not want to use that word." Like, because I knew it had a lot of connotations for a lot of different people, right? Sometimes it can bring up this idea of someone else has authority over us. And I knew from my experience of working with women that sometimes that can be a difficult experience and feeling like, if you had a negative relationship with a father or something who was very controlling, it's like, oh, no, I don't like that. Other times, there's the idea of even personal authority is something that has become, again, more vocal or discussed in recent years. And oftentimes, that idea is, again, around this thing of like, an individual, particularly against the church, right? And so it's like, well, I have my personal authority and my things over it, and here's general authority, and I don't always have to listen to things because I have my own personal authority, and that's what's important. And I didn't like that energy either because it felt very combative in a lot of ways and felt like it was falling oftentimes too much into this place of just having the like, I'm a strong woman feel. Okay? So I was trying to figure out what, though, is the reason to have this word here. Like, why would God put this impression on my heart? So I went to the dictionary and I looked up the word authority. And I was fascinated by what I read, especially because it was just like coming from Merriam's dictionary, right? Like, I'm not even looking for a church description or definition here. I was looking just like, what is the basics of this word and this idea? What does it mean? And the definition that I found was power to influence or command thought, opinion, or behavior. And when I read that, again, power to influence or command thought, opinion, or behavior, it hit my heart so strongly. I was like, oh my goodness, this is what I have been taught. What I could suddenly see prophets and apostles had been teaching that for such a long time. It made me think of especially President Nelson's talk a few years back, where he was encouraging us as women to really understand and study the access we had to priesthood power, right? So that we could better have the ability to influence or command our thoughts, our um, behaviors, and opinions is the other definition that was in there, right? And so, what I found really interesting is if our feminine identity, sort of this blueprint for how we're meant to be operating, and our ability to connect with and understand spiritual principles is kind of the fuel for helping give us energy to move through things. Personal authority, I found, was the place that actually took that blueprint and that source of energy and combined it into the action and like actually making things happen in our lives, right? To influence the results that show up in our lives. And so, as I was studying and learning more about this idea of our personal power or personal authority, I found that there were two essential elements to it, and that was ownership and that was direction. Okay. And it was fascinating when I went and I looked at every challenge that I was having in my life. Every one of them could trace back to, in some way, I was not taking enough ownership, and in some way, I was not directing enough. Now, I want to talk about these because it can bring up some confusion sometimes over what I mean. And I want to make sure we get this right. Okay. Because when I talk about ownership, I'm not talking about we are falling back into that place that we were talking about with strong before, where it's like, oh, I just have to do everything myself. Okay. No, 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 no. That is not what I mean. Okay. When we talk about ownership, this is getting very, very real about your time, about your energy, about your desires, and about your own needs. Okay. You become responsible for recognizing what those are, communicating them to others around you, and prioritizing them. Okay? Recognizing, communicating, and prioritizing. If we're not doing those three things, then we are not operating from a place of our personal authority or ability to influence things. And far too often, I see as women, we fall into this pattern where we are not doing those things. We are so focused on our connection or our relationship to other people or just all of the things that seem to be pulling at us that it is an intentional, active process to be like, wait, hang on, let me get clear on what I think, what I feel, what I need, what I want, and from that place, step into the conversations and experiences. For me, I was a recovering perfectionist and people pleaser. Anyone else in the house have challenges in this place? All right. Give me a little 1 to 5 in the chat if you relate. Okay. But I was so focused on just valuing the relationships around me that I did not want to disrupt that. Right? So I would downplay or even disconnect from, again, my own thoughts, wants, feelings, desires, needs, because I was so focused on the thoughts, ideas, needs, feelings of other people. Okay. So I would, it could be something as simple as, hey, we're going to go out to dinner tonight. Where do you want to go? And I'd be like, oh, I don't really care. I love everything. It's all good. What do you guys think? Right? And to me, that was coming from a place of service, of love, of caring, of compassion, right? I'm being so agreeable. I'm being so kind. Look at what I'm doing for the relationship. What I didn't realize is one, that could actually sometimes make it harder to make decisions. Because if everybody was like, I don't care, I don't know, then you just get stuck in this thing of like, nobody's making a decision until hopefully you have the one family member or the one friend who is like, well, I want Italian, so let's go have Italian tonight. And everybody else just kind of goes along with it. Right? So it can actually make cooperation and decision making more difficult in a group. Whereas if you have an ability to say, "Ooh, I'm in the mood for pizza. I'm in the mood for burgers. I'm in the mood for Italian," and you decide, "Hey, well, let's go to the Cheesecake Factory because they have all three of those there," right? You can much more clearly make decisions that are more effective and benefit more people, but it requires being willing to take that ownership and bring it in. So it actually impacts our relationships when we do not take this ownership. Okay. Similarly, this also shows up in like marriage relationships, right? When we do not take ownership for, I'm tired, I don't have enough time for this, I need to take a shower, right? Whatever it is that's going on in your life, if we're not taking ownership for that, we're not communicating that, we can again fall into this default place of, if I don't do it, nobody else will do it, or it's just easier if I do it, right? And what actually happens is we end up getting depleted and exhausted because we are taking ownership over everything and everyone. Okay. But this doesn't end up helping our relationships or our dynamics. Our kids are not learning the skills for the things that they need in the same ways if we're just doing everything for them, right? Usually it's a little easier to see that of like, yes, I want you learning how to clean your room. So I'm going to help, like, take the intentional time to help you learn how to take ownership over your own stuff. But you know what's really hard? It's really hard to be a mom who is trying to teach that to your kids when you don't know how to do it for yourself very well, right? And so it's like parenting then becomes that much harder because you're trying to do something you're not really practiced in. Right? And again, this is not like blame, shame, anything. The whole point of clarity is to give us direction of like, okay, I now understand the problem or the challenges or the things that have been going on. So I know what I need to be working on or doing differently to make things show up in the ways that I'm wanting them to be more effective and efficient in it. Okay. Same thing. If there are things in our lives that we are wanting to do or create, maybe they are impressions or desires that God has placed on your heart. Maybe it's a podcast you're meant to start. Maybe it's an Instagram account. Maybe it's a business idea that you have. Maybe it's asking for that promotion or taking the leap to do something new, right? Whatever those things are, oftentimes we struggle in, again, either the ownership or sometimes the direction, right? We don't want to have to do the directing, right? We're like, well, God, tell me exactly what I need to do. And should I do it this way or should I do it this way? Right? There's kind of a classic thing of God being like, well, you decide, right? And it's like, "Ugh, I hate when I get that answer, right? But a part of this is actually foundational in God trying to say, no, 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 I need you to learn how to be a woman who can operate from this place of pillar presence, which means you are very clear on the blueprint of who you are. You know how to connect to me and hold my spiritual power. And I can trust in you that you have built and established that personal authority, that you know how to take ownership over things and to direct them. Right? That is where we harness that power and we turn it into the influence, the impact, and the results that we're wanting to create in our personal lives or in the lives of others around us. Without having those three pillars in place and being able to operate from that pillar presence, we limit what we are actually capable of being able to do. Right? So we have big desires, we have big dreams, we feel big callings, and we look at it and go, ah, how am I supposed to be able to do this? I feel so drained, I feel so depleted. It is usually because in one or more of these areas, we are not fully rooted in that pillar presence to give us that momentum to move through and actually make the things happen. Okay. But when we learn how to have the three of these together, that's when life becomes so beautiful because you are working in harmony with your own biology, with your own spiritual physiology. We didn't even get time to talk about that, what that is today, right? But it is so powerful because it's like trying to grow a garden and not understanding the seasons. Right? And so you're planting in fall and then wondering why everything dies and it's not coming up and things aren't there, right? So you understand and work in harmony with who you are. You have a new level of confidence and trust. You don't just believe that God exists. You don't just have faith in the principles and the practices that are necessary. You actually have a working, tangible relationship, the kind where you feel confident in knowing this is what I'm feeling, this is the direction I'm taking. And you have that skill set of being able to have your own personal authority for ownership and direction in your life that actually allows you to make things happen in your life. Okay? Whether it is creating a new routine for your kids, whether it is the way you want to show up in your calling, the challenges you're having in getting support from your spouse or communicating with them, these three are the foundation for it all. Okay? So, the last thing that I want to talk about here is the costs and the impacts when we don't have those three. Okay. So, the first is when we do not have all three of these in place so that we can operate from that pillar presence. There are 5 areas of impact that I have noticed show up the most. Or, sorry, 4 areas. And that is in our parenting. So that's going to be our relationship with our children or our relationship with our parents. Sometimes it goes backwards, sometimes it's forwards in generations, right? So this can look like we struggle in our parenting because we're actually like, this is one of the things that I learned. I knew I was off in my feminine nature when I was like resenting my children, which sounds really bad to say, but to be real, that's a very real experience that can show up. That there are days and times where it's just like, I am resenting having to take care of you or having to do things with you. And that was almost always an indicator that something was off in my feminine balance. I was not fully in that because when I was fully nourished in my feminine identity, I loved being with and around my kids. Okay. So that was a little flag, right? That it would impact my relationship with my kids. I would get short. I would get frustrated. I would get more demanding and controlling. I had less patience. I was not willing to walk with them and like help them have the experiences that they wanted. And it would get to the point sometimes where I was just like, I want to send you in your room and I'm going to just deal with everything myself. Right? Like, I cannot handle this. Okay. So it affects our parenting. That spiritual power also can come into play, right? You're trying to make decisions for your children, trying to navigate how am I supposed to be raising this child for a world that I probably can't even comprehend what it's going to look like when they're living in it. Right? We're kind of in that level of change in our society right now. It's happening fast. So, to try and figure out how to develop these skills ourselves, transfer them to our kids, and do it in time for some world that we don't even know what it's going to look like, that's a lot of pressure to be holding on yourself. To not have the spiritual power backing you up behind you that is not only helping you feel clear and conscious on what are the decisions you're making for your children, what is important for them, what do they need to be learning, what do they need to hear today, what is going to be important, not just a myriad of all the different parenting ideas and books and languages and things that are out there, right? We don't have time to go through all the information that is available right now. We need to know how to have that a connection to be able to rely on it and to regularly use it in our lives. Okay? Parenting is also affected again by the personal authority aspect. We talked about this a little bit, right? It's really hard to teach your kids ownership over things when you're struggling to do it yourself. And it's really hard to know how do I operate from this place of direction, right? That's another skill that, oh my gosh, motherhood requires you to learn is how to direct. But it's really hard to understand how to direct versus how to control. Right? Control's pretty easy. That's why I say you do this or else. Right? Direction requires you to hold and know what are your own limits? What are your own bounds? What are your own expectations? And when we're just fumbling into the day and we haven't taken the time to get clear on what those are, then our communication is not going to be clear with our kids. They're not going to know how to interact with us, right? So it's going to make those things more challenging, more difficult for them to learn. Okay. So that's just one example of how each three of these areas can impact our parenting. It shows also up in our marriages, right? Again, if we're not operating in that feminine, it actually changes the relationship, the connection that we feel, the love, the support, the polarity that can exist in that dynamic can get off if we're too much in a masculine expression and not enough in that feminine one, biologically and relationally. There's also fascinating things about learning. What is feminine communication versus masculine communication? How do we communicate differently? And recognizing that they're actually designed to work together, but they're inverse and opposite from each other. And so if you don't understand that pattern, it can feel like you're just talking past each other all the time. You keep trying to say the same thing. They're not hearing you. They're not understanding what's going on. And you can hit this impasse of like, ugh, how are we supposed to work together? Right? Again, spiritual power. When we don't have that fuel and that source that is helping us get the clarity and the direction for how we're moving forward, it limits the things that we can show up, not only in our relationship and understanding it, but also in the things that we're creating together in our lives. Right? And again, that personal authority, getting into a place of rebalancing that and holding our own ownership and direction is what actually creates room for more support to show up, okay? So that we are not left doing it all. Okay? The other areas that this can show up in are your relationship with yourself. So feeling like I'm not confident, I'm not capable. I had one gal that I worked with one time, and she really struggled with her worth and feeling like she was intelligent because her dad basically had raised her in this way of like, girls aren't smart and they're not intelligent. So that was like a whole thing throughout her relationship. She had a flawed understanding of her feminine nature that was impacting her relationship with herself. It showed up in making it more difficult to believe that she was capable of other things like her spiritual connection and understanding the principles that were there and applying it in her life. And it definitely limited her ability to take ownership and direction over her own life because she had this limiting view on who she was, what she was capable of doing, how she was doing that, which kept her from being able to recognize, oh, I can have ownership over my ideas. I may not necessarily even have to be like good at math to recognize I have an intelligence, I have thoughts, I have ideas that matter, that are meant to be shared, that are valued, right? And relearning how to take ownership over those, right? So sometimes it affects our personal relationship with ourselves. And then sometimes it can impact our relationship or our understanding with God, with our faith, with the church, right? And that can show up in different ways of feeling like I'm not sure or understanding of what my feminine role or nature is. Does God care about it? What does that look like? What is my role in the eternities, right? There can be these different questions that can start to show up. There can be things about understanding what does it look like for me as a woman, as a mother? How do I access priesthood power? How do I bring it into my life? What does that look like? It can also bring in these questions around you know, trying to recognize what is my role? How am I meant to serve? How am I meant to show up? What does God expect for me in my life? Right? And this is the one that really comes into play with the personal authority is when God invites us into something or places something on our heart and minds, we have to be able to be the ones to take that ownership and move it into direction, right? God doesn't do it for us because God already knows how, right? God expects us to learn how to do that. And sometimes that is one of the most scary things to take ownership over this, to say, yes, I'm going to accept this. I'm going to choose this. I'm going to do this thing. And so there's again that dynamic that can show up that we can question or doubt ourselves or our roles or our influence. Okay. So I want you to put in the chat, which of those four areas do you feel like impacts you the most? Your parenting, your marriage, your relationship with yourself, your faith, or church? What do you think is impacted in your life the most? The moment. Okay. And we can just do like one, two, three, or four. So do a one if it's parenting, do a two if it's your marriage, do a three if it's your relationship with yourself, and do a four if it's your relationship with faith or God. Okay. One, two, three, or four. And then we're gonna quickly cover the costs here because I want to paint a good picture for you. Okay, Gina says two. Love that. Beautiful. So that marriage dynamic, yep, that is a big one. It can be such a big challenge, right? And over time, these impacts can end up costing us. And I found that there are four key areas where these costs tend to show up. One of them is our time, the other is our energy, the third one is our resources, and the fourth one is our health. Okay, so time, pretty clear what that is. Energy, this can be like how much energy do you put towards something, right? Resources, this can be financial, but it can also be like social, our social interactions. And then our health, this can be our physical health, our mental health, our emotional health, even our spiritual health, right? So when we don't have this ability to operate from that pillar presence, it's going to cost us. It is going to take us more time to get things done because we're not working from that blueprint, or we're not utilizing the fuel that's happening, or we're being wishy-washy in how we're showing up, right? And so that's impacting the amount of time that it takes for things to occur. It can impact us in our energy, right? Where we have to compensate because we're not actually operating from these three central points, right? We're not aligned with our feminine nature. So we have to compensate for that, which costs us more energy. We're not maybe utilizing the fullness of the spiritual power that is available to us. So again, we're relying on our own to compensate for that. Or again, we're having to expend additional energy because we are not recognizing what is it we're actually meant to be taking ownership over. And instead, we're holding many things that are not meant for us to be holding. right? That really can deplete our energy. Resources, again, show up in our financial and it shows up in our health, probably one of the biggest ones, especially mentally and emotionally, but even physically, right? Especially you're not aligning with that feminine nature, it can have a big toll on our biology. We're not utilizing all that spiritual power. We may be operating for more stress on our physical body than it needs to be having. Okay. So, understanding these things is all powerful and essential. Okay, this is why I'm so passionate about sharing it. And it's why I want to give you two special opportunities to start practicing some of this today before we wrap up here in the next 3 minutes and get you on your day with the rest of the things that you're doing. Okay. So, the first one is I want to give you an opportunity. If you have enjoyed the things that you have been sharing or hearing here, and you would like a more personalized map, right? Because we kind of did some questions here. We were going through some of the basics, but if you want to really hone in on like, what is it that's actually going on in your specific life? What's impacting you the most? What are the changes that could make most specifically for you? I want to open up an opportunity for us to connect on a live in-person call, just one-on-one. This is not like me trying to sell you or anything. It is, again, the main purpose is I want to show up for you. So if at any point, this is something that I do, I teach this pillar presence in my Thriving Feminine Women's group. So if any of you are ever curious about that at a later time, we could set up a separate time to discuss that. But right now, I just want to be helping women figure this out more. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a link here in the chat for those of you who are interested in getting a little bit more specific eyes on your life and how to more practically help you. Okay. So, and I want you to as well text the word. We're going to use strong today. I'm going to put my phone number in here. It's 385-212-4236. Okay. And that is going to be to make sure that we can stay in contact. So if there's any issues with the scheduling here, we can get that worked out. But you guys will have the opportunity to just go ahead and schedule that right now. That is just free time that I love sharing because I know the impact that this has. And I see and talk with so many women all the time who are just struggling when they don't need to, right? Like when you know something, when you understand some of these things, it has that potential to get easier. And I want to help as many women as I can lighten the load that we have. So, um, I'm gonna go ahead and you guys can share or you guys can use that link here to sign up. And then the second thing we're going to do here is I want to give you an opportunity to practice standing in that pillar presence, which is basically when we operate from this place of connecting to ourselves and making a decision of what feels right for us, regardless of the circumstances around here. So I'm going to go around and I'm going to ask you one by one if this is something that you would like to take advantage of, booking this experience call. I do not care one way or another. So you can say yes, you can say no if it feels good or aligned for you. But I want to give you that opportunity of, again, taking some of that ownership, knowing what's right for you, and moving through. So, Tati, does this feel like something? Did I say that right again? I can't remember how I said it earlier. But is this something that feels like what you would like to do? Simple yes or no here. Yes, but not right now. Okay, awesome. No worries. We will circle back. Sarah, I know we have connected before in the past. Sarah's awesome. Good. We just did this like, what was it, last week or so? So it was awesome with her. Cherie, is this something you'd like to take advantage of right now? Okay. It was hard to take notes while reading the transcript. Can you send me the print version for me to highlight and ponder on? Yes, absolutely. No worries. I will send that to you so you can make a decision. I'm so glad that you were here. And then Krista, is this something that you would be interested in?
Hi. Um, were we talking or were we? I can't remember.
You're good. I was just asking if you would be interested in doing one of these experience calls to get a little bit more personalized map for you on what areas would most benefit you and how to work on them.
Um, yeah, I know. Yeah, I just want to say like it's been life changing because I've done this before, and with Emily for 3 months, and it was so worth it. So I just want to say that, and then I'd love to talk with you again. So, yeah.
Awesome. I know it's one of those things where I love when I get repeat gals who just show up again and we get to continue learning over and over. And so I always love putting that opportunity out because I know, again, it's that cycle thing, right? So we go through it one time and it's like, oh, this is so good. And now from where you are, there's the opportunity to look at it again. So um,
Yeah,
there's
thanks.
never any pressure, but
Yeah.
always the invitation. Hey, awesome. Gina, how about for you? Yes or no? Let me get you signed up here. Okay. Maybe in the future. Sorry, had a doctor. No worries, you're good. Okay, sounds great. And then Wes and Nicole, how about you guys? I'm assuming it's Nicole who's here, but awesome. Yes, Gina, I will get you that as well. No worries. All of you who registered too, you should be getting the replay as well, so you can go back and re-listen to it too. So, okay. It looks like Nicole might be busy with something else, so you've got my number here. Go ahead and let me know if that's something you're interested in, and we will go from there. But thank you all. Oh, Christy's coming back in. We'll give her a chance here. All right. Christy, we are, or yes, Christy. Sorry, I read Krista, and then I was meaning to talk to Christy. So, Christy, I'm glad you're back in here. I was just going through one by one and inviting anyone who wanted to hop on a call with me so we can map out more directly for you. Which area are you struggling with, and some ways that you could personally start shifting out of it. I would love to support you in doing that. So, um, we're just going through yes or no. If that's something that feels like it would be of value to you right now, let me know. To be a yes or a no? Hey, Christy might be otherwise occupied as well, but it was wonderful having you all here. I will be sharing more of this. It's great for those of you we've connected with. I'm looking forward to doing more, and thank you all for being here. So have a wonderful rest of the day.